Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Marvel Crisis Protocol roster building episode. And today we are going to be building a Dracula roster, which is technically something we did a couple weeks ago as well. But we're going to be building a different one here today, and I figure being a newer model, hopefully people will still be excited about Dracula-related things, because I know he's still really hyped up in my local scene. So yeah, the idea with this list is basically going to be trying to abuse his leadership to the absolute fullest. So, personally, I'm a little down on his leadership, just kind of in a regular game-to-game sort of situation, but I think if you're really pushing it and you're bringing models that can take advantage of it, it has the potential to be really interesting. So that's what we're going to be trying to build out here and see what we can do with it. So, before we get too far into things first, we're going to have to include Dracula himself here, and it being a tactics card leadership, we are going to have to include the Thralls of Dracula tactics card here, and it's on the screen there if anyone isn't familiar with it, but basically the idea is you can pay a power to give someone bleed, and if they already have bleed, you get to heal yourself instead. So yeah, really interesting leadership there, and there's kind of some obvious synergies that we're going to kind of go over here with that leadership. All right, so right out the gate, there are, I want to say, 4 characters in the game that care about an opponent already having specifically the bleed condition. So I think it's a good place to kind of start with those characters. That's going to do half of our list for us. And one thing that kind of helps filter this out is using the tags on Jarvis here to just kind of search for characters with the bleed tag. This does also include characters that are bleed immune, but generally speaking, most characters don't benefit from something like bleed unless they can hand it out. So this is a good way to kind of narrow down the types of characters that might be relevant here. So the first one we're of course going to look at is Blade. Blade benefits from giving out the bleed condition in a couple different ways here. Firstly, he has his Knight of the Dampier here, where basically if the enemy is bleeding, he gets full rerolls on his attack dice. That's obviously really good. So yeah, he can hopefully take advantage of that. He does already have good ways to hand out the bleed, so it could just be extra healing for him as well. But in addition to that, it's more than just one extra healing for him, because he also has this here, where at the end of this character's activation, he gains a power and removes a damage from itself for each other character within range 2 of it that is bleeding. So yeah, basically, handing out bleeds is going to make him, if he wants to double tap with his spender, he can suddenly do that. If he's starting the turn on 9 power, be like, all right, spend 1, you're bleeding, spender, we get full rerolls on both of them. You kind of get that extra little bit of flexibility that he doesn't have before, whereas before, the first spender wouldn't have had full rerolls, or you would have wanted to use one of the other attacks or something like that. So you get that, and then of course you get to stack the healing. So really solid for Mr. Blade. The next character on the list here that we're going to be looking at is actually Drax. And this is one that I'm really excited about in this affiliation, because I've been saying for a long time that I think Drax is a very solid character who's just kind of outshone by the other Guardians of the Galaxy. But in the Dracula affiliation, he has the ability to hand out his bleed without making any attack rolls and without needing to roll that pesky wild on his Blade's attack here. And the reason why he wants to hand out that bleed is because if the target character has the bleed special condition on his basic Blade's attack here, he gets 2 attack dice rerolls during that attack. 5 dice with 2 rerolls is a very solid builder for a 3 threat. So yeah, it makes him a very threatening model, even if, he's got a walk or something, because he still doesn't have that mobility, which is kind of his biggest weakness in a normal game. But, suddenly, walking and making an attack like that doesn't feel as bad as it usually would with him. So yeah, he suddenly kind of becomes a very menacing threat on the table there. So yeah, definitely a great spot for Drax. So we'll be throwing him in there too. The next one down the list here that we're going to be taking a look at is Hela. And yeah, this is another one I'm really excited about here. So she has the spender here, where if the target character has the bleed condition, they don't count wilds as successes when defending against this attack. And usually her only way of handing out bleed is a wild on her builder here. So yeah, again, just having that extra way of handing out, it's going to be really nice for her. You get the healing too, which is certainly nice. I mean, if you stack that with something like Death's Embrace, you can kind of, heal a few more in a turn than you normally would, which can definitely be solid. So yeah, I definitely like that kind of synergy there as well. But yeah, the big thing is just making your spender better. And even though the range bands are different, you do still have Death's Embrace to be able to kind of close that gap, apply the bleed, and then start going. So yeah, I really, really like her here. And then the last one on the list of characters that actually benefit from the bleed condition already being on the board is Scourge. And this is with his spender, and it's the exact same as Drax's builder in this case. If the target character is bleeding, you get 2 rerolls on your attack dice, which makes this 8 dice spender here quite terrifying because, I mean, 8 dice with 2 rerolls turns out really, really good. So yeah, definitely something that can really push Scourge up to 11 here. Alright, so that is it for characters that actually explicitly benefit from having bleed on the target. So next, I want to add at least a couple characters that are good at handing bleed out. Obviously the leadership is going to be doing a lot of that for us as well, but if we've already put out bleed, it's going to make it easier for these characters to do that without having to spend that extra power, and it's going to give us that healing option on the remaining characters in the team. Also, with these models that we're going to be looking at, if you want to heal yourself, you can hand out the bleed using your attacks and things like that, and then heal using the leadership, so you kind of have that extra flexibility there. And the first model I want to look at regarding this is actually going to be Venom here. The reason why I want Venom in this is for a couple things. First of all, the bleed on his attack here is automatic, so it's just happening whether you did damage, rolled a trigger, nothing like that. Always going to happen. So yeah, I really like it for that. He also has this We Are Venom attack here, which is going to let him heal based on the damage that he deals. This is very, very similar to something on Dracula himself's card, but I really like it for, on his turn, he can hand out the bleed with that builder, he can heal himself for 1 off of the thing, and then go in for a spender and really just kind of stack up that healing in a turn. So yeah, I really, really like the kind of ability to stack the healing there, and you might see a bit of a theme here. That's kind of something that I'm going for with a lot of the characters in this list. And in general, I do think he's just a good utility piece here. We kind of have a bunch of damage dealers here, but he has the ability to throw some characters, he can pull some characters, really, really useful things that the rest of the list isn't doing too heavily. We have a couple of them here and there, so having an extra option there is great. Something to keep in mind with him if you are making a similar choice in your own version of the list is that both Dracula, Blade, and Venom all kind of have a weakness to energy attacks, so you got to keep that in mind. You don't want to build too heavily, or at least you want to be careful of what you're playing into. The next model I want to include here for the Bleed team is going to be Werewolf by Night. The main reason for this, honestly, is just that he comes in the Dracula box. He's still new and exciting, and I've been enjoying, trying to get him on the table and things like that. So I really like him for that. But he does kind of fill a neat role there. He's got that self-throw, so he's got some extra damage sources there. He's got 2 different things that can hand out bleed, whether he's doing his builder or his spender. So that's definitely nice. Handing it out at range 3, which is also a plus on Venom there, so you have that little bit of flexibility there, but then that leap putting you within range 1 so you can benefit from the healing at close range, definitely a nice thing to have. Midnight Massacre can kind of play into that as well, being able to throw the slash out, get that bleed on during your opponent's turn, and then be able to abuse it on your other character's turns can be something you can really, hopefully take advantage of. So yeah, I think he's probably one of the most basic choices that I have for this one. But he's one of the new monsters, so I wanted to throw him in here. But yeah, you could probably for this slot pick pretty much any of the bleed appliers. You want to pick something a little bit more consistent. You don't want one of those like, oh, it's a wild on 4 dice sort of thing. But yeah, anyone who relatively consistently applies bleed on their builders, probably a decent pick for this slot. Alright, so now that we've got a couple characters that are just good at handing out bleed, we've got all of our characters that benefit from bleed, I want to pick some more interesting ones, some things that kind of do things that we might not really be thinking too much about. So the first one that I was thinking of for this is actually Hood here. So Hood's kind of interesting to me because he doesn't actually hand out bleed on his normal part of his card here. He only does it in his possessed form where he has that wild bleed on a 6 dice attack. So it's not the most consistent handout in the world. But what I think makes Hood interesting for something like this is that in his normal mode here, he has this Black Arts superpower here, which is going to allow him to heal an ally. Again, really stacking that healing on. And then he's going to be able to give, or he has to give that ally the bleed special condition, which is usually not that great. But if we look at some of our other models in the list here, such as Dracula, where he'll actually heal himself off of his own bleed, and then Blade, who won't heal himself off of his own bleed, but he will heal off of his allies' bleeds. So, you know, you kind of get to heal more than one model at a time with stuff like that. So, yeah, personally, I just think it's a really, really interesting usage there. In addition to that, when you are in your possessed mode here and you're going in, you're getting up close and personal with those wild bleeds, you have that damage reduction by 2, so the healing is going to be extra beneficial on a model like Hood. So yeah, I really, really like Hood here, and yeah, he's going to take that first kind of interesting slot. The next one I want to include here is kind of filling a similar slot to that with Hood, and that is going to be Encanto, the Living Mummy. So he doesn't have any way of handing out the bleed condition himself, which is at first a little bit of an anti-synergy with leadership. But once you've been handing out that bleed to some of your opponent's models already, using some of those other characters like Venom or Werewolf by Night, I think Encanto can take a lot of advantage out of the healing there. He has an insane ability to heal himself on his own turn, spending his captured soul tokens that he gets pretty consistently. So yeah, I really, really like him with the leadership, just being able to kind of run around and just fully heal up. You know, if you don't take this guy down and things are happening on other parts of the board, he is going to be fully healing himself back up, and then you know, being able to use that leadership to kind of take advantage of that and maybe keep a couple souls in the process is a big deal. So yeah, personally, I really like the idea of him here, and again, kind of just playing to that, you know, newer box, still a lot of excitement around it, and I'm going to try and squeeze these guys into the list because I think they're cool and I want to play with them. Another kind of benefit that this does give you is you now have 3 Midnight Suns models in the roster here in Blade, Werewolf by Night, and Encanto. So if we want to flex over to the Midnight Suns leadership, say our opponent has a lot of bleed immunities or something like that, we can kind of do that here and, you know, maybe just kind of go a little lighter on some of the bleed characters, you know, at that point. Maybe we're running, you know, those 3. Hood is still probably a really solid shout, and we can kind of go from there. So, yeah, I think that's a decent flex to have in a list like this that can be pretty easily countered by something that's really good against conditions. So nice to have that, and I still think he plays with it really, really well. And for our 10th and final roster slot here, this one might be a little out of nowhere, but I'm going to be picking Apocalypse here. Now, one of my locals mentioned the idea of this to me, and I think it was really, really cool, so I want to throw that in here. I don't know where it's originally from. It's not an original idea, though, so I'm just going to throw that out here now. But yeah, I think Apocalypse is really interesting for this one. Usually, I wouldn't be interested in Apocalypse without his own leadership, because, you know, that mobility not being there on a 6 threat is definitely going to hurt. But yeah, I think it's a cool one. So he doesn't actually hand out bleed usually. He can hand out the shock or root special conditions using his regular attack here. But the big things here are, firstly, his Ensabaneur's Judgment, where he's going to get 2 extra dice for each special condition the target character has. So again, you know, really consistently handing out those bleeds. You're going to be able to consistently make this a 10 dicer, which, you know, for 3 power, that's pretty good. Then you also have, is it this one here? Yeah, it's You Will Be Remade Through Me. So this is a 1-cost reactive that says when an enemy character within 5 would gain a special condition it already has, this character may use this superpower. The enemy character gains the Bleed, Shock, Slow, or Incinerate special condition instead. A character can be affected by this superpower only once per turn. So I just actually double checked to make sure this works the way I think it does, and I'm not going to be 100% confident on this until I see like a proper judge ruling for it, but I'm pretty sure the way the leadership is ruled is basically you try to hand out the bleed condition, and if they already have it, you may heal 1 damage instead. So I think you can still choose to, instead of healing 1 damage, still go with the attempt to apply bleed and just fail, in which case you would be able to use this and give them a different condition instead. Even if that's not the case, I still think there's value here just using this before you use your attacks that you would use to hand out bleed, especially with those original characters we were talking about, like Drax, Hela, or Scourge. All of those attacks that benefit from having bleed on the target also hand out bleed themselves. So you get to kind of stack that, say your first attack is they're already bleeding. So your first attack, you'll light them on fire. It is only once per turn, so you don't get to do it again, but then on your second attack, you're going to benefit from that, or whatever other condition you feel like throwing out. So yeah, I think he makes a really, really interesting slot in this list, and potentially throws a lot of people off because they're not expecting that. In addition, if you do the Midnight Suns flex, I think giving him the bump in the night is a good kind of middle ground on not having his famine leap there that he gets in his own affiliation. So yeah, I think he's a solid choice for the 10th slot in this list. But that is going to do it for characters, so we're going to go ahead and jump over to tactics cards. And yeah, this will be an interesting one. I'm not actually 100% sure what I'm doing here. Alrighty, so going into cards, first things first, we're going to take a look at our restricted slots here. And I think Brace for Impact at this point is just kind of a lock for me in most, if not all, lists. From there, I think it's a little bit more interesting of a choice. I think we have enough healing that Patch Up is kind of overkill. I could still see an argument for it, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I think Sacrifice is really interesting in a list like this, though, so I think I'm going to lean that way here, just because we have a lot of characters that do have crackback style effects, and with all the healing, we can kind of, force some attacks into some characters that we know are going to be able to heal it back up. So yeah, I think that's an interesting choice for our next card there. Going from there, we're going to take a look at some of the character cards that we can choose to include here. And I think the first one that's going to be kind of easy to include here is Lethal Protector. If you're bringing Venom, this is just a good card to have. Kind of doubling up on that idea of, being able to throw it into one of your crackback characters, because we do have, 3 or 4 of them in this list. So yeah, definitely taking advantage of that there with Lethal Protector. Next, because I do think we're going to have plenty of space for cards here, it might be one worth considering cutting if we're going over, but I think Hood's Gang is a worthy inclusion here. I think if I was trying to run this list, I'd be trying to include Hood at least somewhat often. So yeah, I'm going to throw Hood's Gang in there because I think this is a pretty reasonable card, and you can kind of get some extra value out of it with those crackback attacks. Being able to kind of make more attacks obviously is good for that. And stacking rerolls with a bunch of your characters who are getting rerolls from having bleed on their targets is also going to be nice there. So yeah, we're going to throw that in there as well. Alright, from there, we're going to move into affiliation cards, where of course we already have our leadership Thralls of Dracula here. But I think we're also going to include 1 or 2 cards for Midnight Suns. Notably, I want to throw Siege of Darkness in here. I think if we're playing Midnight Suns, it's worth including Siege. I don't think the other cards are necessarily worth it in this case. I like Bats when you have something like a Hulk there, but in this case, I don't think it's going to be quite as useful, so we're going to go without Bats in this case. But I think there could be an argument to include it, especially if you're really not sure what to do with your last few slots. Next, we are going to look at a couple of generic options, things that we'll be able to take advantage of with everyone. And I think Recalibration Matrix is a kind of nice start for this. We have a lot of big dice attacks, so we're going to want to take advantage of that where we can. So yeah, I definitely like Recal in this list. In addition, I've just been really, really high on Survival lately, so I'm going to throw Survival in here as well, because I think it's a great card. And yeah, I don't think it's a, every game card by any means, but I do really, really like it, so we're going to include it in here as well. Another one I think that's definitely worth including is going to be Warpath. I just really, really like Warpath. I think it is a fantastic card, and I think with all of these crackback models, we can get extra value out of it. Oh, you were attacking me at range 4, you thought you were safe? Well, no, I'm not only in your face now, which is where this model wants to be, but I'm also hitting you back. So stuff like that, really, really good. And yeah, just a really solid card. Alright, looking at this last slot here, I really don't know what to include, honestly. There's a few half-decent options, but nothing's really jumping out at me as, like, I need to include this. Stuff like Venomize could be kind of interesting with some of the characters that we have. Weapons of Midgard is less interesting. Scuttlebutt's one I was actually strongly considering here because I do think we're going to be trying to run Scourge reasonably often. But if I remember correctly with Scourge here, and I'm just going to pull up his stat card just to make sure, but his thing is on his spender. So something like Scuttlebutt where you'd be wanting to spend a bunch of power into it, I don't think we're going to get that much value out of if we're trying to use a spender more often. So it's going to kind of work against the idea of the list, unfortunately. So I'm not really a fan of that one either. And of course, I've lost all my filters here. But yeah, I really don't know. I don't know what the play here is. So I think in the interest of something that's just kind of generically good, it's probably between these two. We do have Werewolf by Night who's going to benefit from instant recovery. I think he might be the only one in the list though. So with him being the only one in the list, we're going to choose Joint Effort here, where yeah, just extra dice once in a while turns out that's good. So we're gonna pick that one. But yeah, this was a tough call because I think the like none of these options are really striking me as things that I feel like I needed to include. So yeah, we'll go with Joint Effort, but it very much is the 10th card in the list. I think we pick pretty much everything else before it unless we're seeing something where we think it's going to be really big, like it's a pretty good card on say emaps and things like that. So we'll see, but yeah, very much taking the 10th slot there. And lastly, here we're going into Crises Selection, and this is going to be an interesting one, I think. I'm not 100% sure how to kind of approach the crises for this one. We don't exactly have a super heavy mobile team. We've got a lot of kind of slower models. We have a couple in there that can really move around, but for the most part, it's going to be a slower team. So we don't want anything like a D map or anything like that. That's going to be too spread out. But on the other hand, I don't think we're the best at that kind of big scrum in the middle of the board. I don't think we're going to be doing it too great on, your research station, your gammas or anything like that. So I think we got to be really careful with the crises we select here. So yeah, I'm going to take a second to think about this for extracts. Okay, so I think with the extracts, what I want to kind of do is focus on taking advantage of the healing where we can, and then beyond that, picking things where we're going to be able to take some sort of advantage with just the specific models in our list, which kind of sounds like what you should be doing with almost all of your scenario choices. So I guess that's kind of obvious. But the first one I think we're going to include here is Struggle for the Cube, which I think is particularly good for this style list. It is a little fast scoring, and I don't know how well the list will be able to keep up with that. But it's got the you're going to gain extra power and you're going to take damage, and that power can one-to-one with your healing, or you can use it as power if you don't feel like you need it. Just because, we're going to be throwing out all those bleeds anyways, so using it to heal could be great, or using it to apply the condition and get your rerolls and whatever you want from that is also going to be great. So yeah, I think just in general, that's going to be a solid choice here. From there, in a kind of similar vein, we're going to take Alien Ship, I think, as our next one. Not too fast scoring, so it kind of has that over Struggle for the Cube. However, this one doesn't gain us power, it just potentially damages us. But because we have that healing, that damage is probably less meaningful to us than it is to our opponent. So we're hopefully going to be able to kind of leverage that. So I think Alien Ship makes our next pick here. From there, I think there's a couple really worthwhile options to consider. Hammers obviously is really good for our crackbacks and things like that. Montesi, we generally have pretty solid Mystic defense, and it's a low scoring scenario, so we do appreciate that. So those are both decent options. Paranoia, I think, would also be an interesting option. Again, maybe a little bit too fast scoring, but we can kind of, make up for that damage in the early game, picking them up relatively easily. It's kind of a weak argument for that one, honestly. But I'm really between these two. Personally, I think I'm going to go with hammers on this one. I think a lot of these models feel really good with hammers, so we'll go that direction. But yeah, I think you kind of go either way here and be reasonably happy with it. Taking a look at secures, I think this is going to be an interesting one for this list as well. And yeah, it's kind of hard to say because I think we're going to have kind of similar issues to what we were having with some of the extract choices of We're not quite good enough for the Gamma or Demons at that type of fight. There's a lot of lists that are just better than that, or at that than us. So we want to kind of avoid those if we can, but we definitely don't have the mobility to be running around the D maps. So we're going to kind of rule those out pretty much immediately, I think. So that leaves us with, I think, some kind of interesting options. The first one that I want to actually include in here is going to be intrusions. And I like intrusions for this because a lot of our models don't have mobility. So being able to actually take advantage of those portals to get from place to place, being able to use those portals for kind of interesting bleed plays as well can be kind of fun. You can have Blade teleport in to something he wants to fight or something like that, and then teleport back to where everyone else has been fighting and now, heal up a bunch from the bleeds over there and stuff like that. I think something like that you can kind of do interesting things within intrusions. So yeah, we're gonna take advantage of that hopefully with this list. Next, I don't know. I think there's a couple solid options here. Deadly meteors is a favorite of mine. That damage you take is probably again more meaningful to our opponent than it is to us. We don't have the type of mobility to rotate points rapidly necessarily, although Werewolf by Night is pretty good for that. Um, but we don't have the type of mobility to take full advantage of that, being a pay to flip, but I do think it's still a really solid scenario for us. In a similar vein, I think this list can definitely be a little bit power hungry, so something like Infinity Formula feels really, really good as well. So either of those would be really, really solid options. I also quite like Scoundrels here, being, we have a lot of kind of melee-oriented models, so being able to kind of move in and be like, well, we're wanting to stand on these points anyways, and if you're trying to shoot us from afar and stuff like that, you're going to be going through cover. So stuff like that can feel really, really good here as well. I think those are kind of the big three I'm debating between here, and I think the more I talk about it, the more I like superpowered Scoundrels. So we're going to take Scoundrels here, and then from there, I'm not really sure between these two. I think my personal bias is what's putting me towards Deadly Meteors here, but I do think between the two of them, Formula is probably the better map for a list like this. So I think I'm gonna go with that one. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure. But I think that's what we're gonna do for our scenarios, and kind of looking at it here, I actually, yeah, I do really like this trio a lot more. So yeah, overall, I'm actually I'm fairly happy with our scenario selection here. And that is going to be the roster completed. So for characters, we have Dracula leading the charge. Alongside him, he has his characters that benefit from the bleed condition, those being Blade, Drax, Hela, and Scourge. Then we got some bleed appliers in Venom and Werewolf by Night. And we've got a few characters that potentially do interesting synergies with the leadership, such as Hood, Encanto, and Apocalypse. So yeah, I think we've got a kind of a cool spread here. I think threat-wise, we also have a pretty decent splattering of threats here. We've got what, three fours, four threes, a couple fives, obviously one of which is our leader, and then we've got Apocalypse as a sixth threat that I think is potentially a really, really interesting pick here. So yeah, I really, really like this. I think it probably leads to some half decent breakdowns. We can kind of just peek here as well. And yeah, no, that seems pretty good. I don't know if that's actually affiliations, yeah, enforce leader, I guess. Yeah, that obviously brings the numbers down, but we still have tons of options, so super here for that. That's kind of what you get when you have one of those leaders that can just do whatever they want, though. So not surprising. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with these 10 here. Definitely let me know down below if there's characters that are like, this is super obvious and somehow I forgot about them that should be taking one of these slots. Very, very interested to hear other takes and other versions of this list. But yeah, that is going to be our version for this. Interesting that it brings up the Horseman thing, even if I am not. I guess because by including him, I'm technically making myself a potential Horseman roster. But then we go into team tactics cards here, where we have Thralls of Dracula, Brace for Impact, Sacrifice, Lethal Protector, Hood's Gang, Siege of Darkness, Recalibration Matrix, Survival, Warpath, and Joint Effort. And lastly, we go to Crises, where we have Struggle for the Cube, alien ship, and fear grips world as worthy terrorized cities for our extracts. And then going on our secures, we have intrusions, superpowered scoundrels, and infinity formula. I'm actually kind of looking forward to trying out something like this. I really want to see how Dracula's leadership makes a few, at least slightly underplayed characters kind of rise up a little bit. Scourge and Drax, namely, but even models like Hela, I haven't really seen a crazy amount of. And Blade, obviously, you never see him outside of Midnight Suns, so I'm really happy to give him a shot there as well. So yeah, I really that is one thing I really like about Dracula's leadership. For as much as I'm personally a little down on it in a kind of competitive sense, I do love that it kind of gives opportunities and encourages building with some models that we haven't really been seeing too much lately. So super here for that, and that's kind of why I wanted to throw this list together. But that is going to do it for my bleed list here. So definitely let me know what you guys think of the list down below, what kind of changes that you guys might make, who you might have put in different slots and things like that. Or if you kind of do the breakdown differently, would you have it be all characters that can really consistently hand out bleed? Definitely curious to hear what you guys think on that one. And again, definitely let me know if there's a character that, I'll be kicking myself over forgetting to include in here, because I'm sure it's going to happen sooner or later. But yeah, that is going to do it for this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please do drop a like down below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. We do discussion focused content like this every week, and we have battle reports on the weekends. So if you're a fan of any of that sort of thing, feel free to jump on in. But that's going to do it for now. So until next time, have a great day, everybody. Peace.